After the 2023 United States Grand Prix, yet more criticism has come the FIA's way. But for once, it has nothing to do with their president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem. After the race in Austin, the FIA's investigation process was put under the microscope after 50% of the cars tested were found to be running illegally. Trouble in Austin. Disqualifications in F1 are rare these days, but when they do happen, they create plenty of talking points. Of the current 20 drivers, 7 of them have been DQ'd, with just Lewis Hamilton and Daniel Ricciardo having been scrubbed from the classified order on 2 occasions. Before Austin, Hamilton's only blemish came in 2009 at the Australian Grand Prix. With the safety car returning to the pit, Jarno Trulli was accused of overtaking Hamilton under safety car conditions, which handed him a 25-second penalty. Only later did it emerge that Hamilton had misled the stewards, and instead of a 25-second penalty, Hamilton was disqualified. Ricciardo's indiscretions came in 2014 with Red Bull, where he had too little fuel in the car, and then in 2019 he had an even more unusual one. 10 days after the race, competitors Racing Point complained that Ricciardo and teammate Nico Hülkenberg had used illegal driver aids. The FIA looked into it and both drivers were disqualified. Before this year's race in the US, 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel was the last F1 driver to be disqualified after his Aston Martin car was found to have too little fuel in it following the 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix, a race he had actually scored a podium in. But while Vettel got in trouble for fuel, it was the floor that caused Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc issues. The surface of the Circuit of the Americas track proved particularly difficult for the drivers. It was bumpy, a mix of old and new tarmac, and uneven in places, meaning driving on one part of the track could feel completely different than driving on another. With a sprint weekend also, teams and drivers had little chances to make changes because as soon as qualifying started on the Friday, the setup was locked in for each car. With the dust settling on a race that saw Hamilton finish P2 and Leclerc in 5th, most would have thought that was all the drama over for the day. That was the case until 17:28 local time, when the FIA's Formula 1 technical delegate Joe Bauer related a mysterious statement saying that of the 4 cars they checked, the planks of Hamilton and Leclerc were found to be worn away too much, leading to trouble further on down the road. What is a plank? To start with, we should take some time to actually explain what a plank is, for it's one of the lesser spotted parts of an F1 car. The only chance you ever get to have a look at them comes when a driver has had a crash and their car needs to be lifted up and away from the scene. As the crane pulls the destroyed car into the sky, you may have noticed what looks like a long thin piece of wood stretching from the front of the car to its rear. While this may look like wood, it's actually a material known as permaglass, which is glass reinforced plastic. The resin applied to it then makes it look like wood, which in the old days it was. Now, why is this so important is that it's one of the pieces of the car that will be checked over by the FIA following a race. What Technical Chief Joe Bauer is looking for is how much this piece of material has been worn away. He will check 4 points of the plank, and if any of it has more than 1 millimeter of wear, that car is disqualified. The purpose of this is to control the top speed of the car by preventing teams from running the car too low to the ground. The lower the car, the quicker the speed, and on a surface like COTA, that means more wear to the plank. Hamilton and Leclerc disqualified. After the race, the FIA checked 4 cars: Verstappen, Hamilton, Norris and Leclerc. For the Red Bull and McLaren drivers, everything was fine, but both Leclerc and Hamilton were in trouble. Their planks were worn away too much in one area, which was in breach of Article 3.5.9e. Both teams were summoned to speak to the stewards, but this is one of the most black and white penalties in the sport and requires no judgment on the part of the FIA, instead simple measurement and mathematics. The teams argued the bumpy surface and sprint weekend meant they did not get a chance to properly set their ride height, but they knew they were fighting a losing battle. Hamilton and Leclerc lost their places and went down as DQ in the history books. It was not this part of the process that had so many people questioning the FIA logic, but instead why were there more cars not checked? The FIA's selective checking. There are plenty of parts of an F1 car that are checked after every race. Each car is weighed, each will have its oil and fuel consumption checked, and each will be checked that they have not made any changes since being in parc fermé conditions. But the nature and complexity of a Formula One car means the FIA opts to be selective with other parts in order to save time. You may have noticed this selectively during a practice session, when instead of a driver arriving at his team's garage after a stint, he pulls in at the first opportunity to be weighed by the FIA. The sport's governing body does this randomly, so when it came to checking the planks after Austin, just 4 cars were chosen. Despite being 4 of the top 5, Hamilton, Leclerc, Verstappen and Norris were chosen at random, but the question then becomes, if 50% of the cars you check failed, should you not check the rest? It's so far a question that's gone unanswered by the FIA, but it does not take a genius to work out why this may have been the case. The most obvious answer is time. Austin is the first leg of a triple header, and if you've ever stuck around after a race, you'll have seen the quick and highly orchestrated effort it takes to clear a track and move on to the next one. For flyaway races, this process is put under even more pressure, and fully checking a car is not a quick thing. By the time the FIA had lifted the car up, accurately measured the wear, then measured it again to be sure, chances are the other 16 competitors would have been packed into a box and halfway to Mexico already. Calling them back would have been a timely and costly affair, which teams would have protested against considering they're operating under a strict budget cap. But should an expedition have been made? Should the FIA have done more? No one is arguing that the disqualification was unfair. Instead, they're asking, is it fair that drivers are either lucky or unlucky? Chances are that both Hamilton and Leclerc's teammate would have been running at a similar ride height, so presumably they would have also been in trouble had the FIA checked their wear. Sky pundit and former F1 driver Martin Brundle perhaps summed it up best. He said, "The next big question, however, is that if 50% of the tested cars failed, then shouldn't all the finishes have been checked? The answer must surely be yes. Being compliant in F1 shouldn't be down to luck, so perhaps the FIA should endeavour to check every car or no cars if looking for a particular problem." In the end, Hamilton and Leclerc were simply unlucky. For the Mercedes driver, it was the first DQ since 2009, while it was Leclerc's first ever. Hamilton took it on the chin, simply stating it was disappointing to lose his place before mentioning the progress the team had made. For Leclerc, it was yet another incident of Ferrari seemingly trying to break him. Together, both drivers lost a combined 30 points, which for Hamilton cost him dear in the race for P2, while Ferrari still have to look over their shoulder at a charging McLaren. Thanks as always for watching this video, and let us know in the comments if you think the FIA were right to test only a few cars, or if they should have tested more once 50% came back illegal. In the meantime, make sure to like the video and also hit subscribe so you never miss a release here on the DRS Straight.